In modern football, there seems to be more young players every single season. And me, a 21-year-old, getting older and older every year, looking at these young players coming through, it is pretty incredible to see, and it honestly makes you think what could have been. So today I'm going to tell you what I would do if I could go back in time to my 15-year-old self who was actually pursuing football. Of course, you can't necessarily compare yourself to these professional players coming through who have been at a professional academy since the age of 3. That is not who I was, that is not who you probably were. So we need to get back to reality, analyze our own situation, and actually think about what would be the best step for us. So as a 15-year-old, the first thing I would do is prioritize football. Now at that time I was in education, obviously, like the majority of 15-year-olds, but football just sort of seemed like something I did a few times a week. Trained for fun, yes I did well, played well in the games, and that was that. I didn't really think about football outside of football. Team training, yes, my concentration was there, I was on it 100%. But then I went home and I never really thought about, what's next? What can I do outside of football to actually improve on the field? I didn't do any recovery, I didn't, concentrate on how good my sleep is, hydration, nutrition. Yes, of course, being a 15-year-old, it can be more difficult because your parents feed you, or there's a high chance of your parents feeding you. So yeah, I wish I did try and sort of push myself into a healthier nutrition. I could have done more to get in healthy snacks, a healthier breakfast, etc, etc. I didn't do any recovery, like I said, so that's one thing I wish I did. My gym workouts were not football tailored at all. That's a big mistake I used to make, and I'm very happy that I actually learned from this mistake when I did, as this could have led to many, many more injuries than it actually did. So I do more off the field to actually try and improve on the field. I'd get in extra work. Like I said, I went to team training, I did my best there, and that's that. I never did any individual work, I never stayed after training to focus on my weaknesses. And those are the fine details where the actual better players come through. And that's where they show they're better. Because in the long term, they progress so much more than players like me who just didn't do the bare minimum, but just turn up and didn't do that little extra work. I remember being told a story, I think by one of my coaches back in the day, about a Chelsea coach who had a few players on trial, but a different coach took the session. After the session, the only thing he asked the coach who took the session was who did extras. And extras meaning who were the players who stayed out after team training to focus on a couple extra things. That doesn't mean, killing yourself and doing fitness for 2 hours. That just means focusing on the small details that you could improve on. And this was so important to that coach because it shows to him who actually have a great professional mindset, who's willing to put in that extra work to get the better of their opponent and improve. Doing these small things shows who you are as a player and a person. That is so important for your career. He didn't ask who did the best in training. He didn't ask who was the most vocal. He asked who did the extras. So don't forget that. As a 15-year-old, I wish I would have started networking earlier. Now, I wouldn't have looked for an opportunity to fly to the other side of the world and try out for a professional team. However, it cannot hurt to have some contacts early on. Just by knowing people and having that contact as an option for later in your career can be a huge asset for your career. The next thing I wish I had did more of was analysing football. Not just watching it, I watched a whole bunch of football, obviously, but actually trying to learn from these matches, because at one point in my career, that was the level I aspired to get to, but I never actually learned from it, which baffles me. So if you're just watching football casually, that's fine. Obviously, it's good to switch off sometimes and just relax. But a lot of the time, you should be analysing football. Learn from these players. Learn from players who play in your position, or learn from players who you'd like to play with a similar style as. The last thing I wish I did as a 15-year-old footballer is enjoyed it more. Looking back and thinking about the amount of times I just took the game for granted is an absolute joke, and I sort of regret this. Because simply having the ability to just kick a ball is a huge privilege, and one that not enough of us realise we actually have, and we don't cherish that fact that it is such a privilege. And so many millions of players out there don't have the opportunities that we have to simply go out on a Saturday and kick a ball with our mates. There are so many players who would do anything just to be in your shoes for one day, to have an opportunity to train with a team, to play with a team, to be in an environment, who have good facilities, etc., etc. So I feel like we need to do better, especially as younger footballers, to actually understand how lucky you are to be in a place like that. Don't take it for granted. Appreciate that you have these opportunities and enjoy football.